What is up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's Ernie, Blerd without fear. Welcome back to the channel. Alright, today's video we're going to be talking about New Mutants, number 17 by Vita Ayala and Rod Rice. And in this video, we're going to learn exactly how Mirage and Karma are going to bust out of this otherworld L7 square, and more importantly, we are also going to learn why they're going after Lady Roma in Otherworld to track down our wayward mutant Josh, and somewhere within all of this, we're going to learn why Krakoa is not the universal cure for all that ails mutant kind, and why some mutants wouldn't want to live there. Not only that, we're also going to learn and reveal about something that Mirage desires to do that ties back to an encounter with Spider-Man. We're going to talk about all this and more right now, but first, let's hit that intro.
Word to wise, grass only greener when it's fertilized. Gave them truth in these songs, they prefer to lies. Destiny beautiful, adrift in her purple lies. You can't see me, you Stevie, wondering how I reach more evolutions than Evie and make it look easy.
So when last we left off with New Mutants number 16, we learned that Mirage and Karma got caught up chasing after this white rabbit. We didn't really completely understand exactly what was going on with this white rabbit. It seemed like it was something that was going on with Otherworld that was supposedly leading them where they needed to be, leading them towards the lost mutant, Josh. While that did kind of seem to be the case, it seemed like they were being led on the trail of Joshua. What actually happens is that they fell into the clutches of Merlin, who is not the nicest person and is not particularly fond of mutants, and more importantly has locked them up in his dungeon, though he has decided to let them go free so long as they do something for him. What Merlin is tasking Karma and Mirage to do is to steal something from Lady Roma. Now, this is a huge undertaking if you really think about the idea that mutants aren't supposed to be in Otherworld anyway right now. So the fact that they were already trying to track down a wayward Joshua to bring him back was already a big deal and an undertaking in and of itself. Now, Merlin has drugged them into his personal little petty squabbles with his daughter Roma. And as you might imagine, the two of them do not get along in any way, shape, form, or fashion. However, things get even more interesting when we discover that the Lady Roma has been on to them this entire time, and while Lady Roma, between the two, herself and Merlin, while she doesn't necessarily so much hate mutants, she doesn't take kindly to people stealing from her, and that creates an entirely new situation that Mirage and Karma are potentially going to have to fight their way out of. But fortunately, cooler heads prevail, and Mirage reveals to Roma that, yeah, you can fight us, we'll take you on. We are, in fact, the mutants who saved your little pathetic otherworld that you were too chicken shit to protect from Apocalypse's original recipe for Horsemen of the Apocalypse, as well as his wife Genesis, who at the time was Annihilation. But Lady Roma is not without reason. She actually appreciates the fact that Mirage and Karma were willing to do what they are doing right now to try and protect one of their own. She also appreciates the passion and fervor with which Mirage and Karma are desperate to fulfill their mission. She's willing to let them go. She even appreciates the fact that the little white rabbit that has been following them around, she appreciates the manifestation of this, and she kind of alludes to something that we're going to talk about here in just a moment. But she alludes to the fact that this is a manifestation of truth that is caged into another being, implying that this is something that is tied to one of them, and the fact that they are able to manifest this is something that's very special. They even take a moment to educate Lady Roma that witch breed is not the preferred nomenclature for mutants, which I thought was another little interesting term there. But getting back to the teapot that Merlin wanted, yes, earlier, Mirage called it a busted-looking magic pot. Well, it just so happens there's nothing magical about that pot in the first place. Lady Roma and her guards find it incredibly hilarious that Merlin would send two mutants to infiltrate her home and steal an average everyday teapot that means absolutely nothing. It's something that even by Lady Roma's own admission, she took on a whim. She didn't even want it, and if Merlin would have been man enough and adult enough to ask her for it, she would just have given it back. But she knew he wouldn't, which is why she took it. And more importantly, it's worthless. Now, that said, she's willing to just give them the teapot. Matter of fact, she's going to magically send it back to Merlin, and they don't even have to go back and see him again because she's probably fairly certain that if they brought it back, Merlin would probably pull some shenanigans, and she's just gonna cut the whole middleman out of this, which I think is probably gonna make Lady Roma the best fetch quest giver in the history of fetch quest givers. However, she does want something back in return, and what she wants is that if she should ever need the mutants again, and by mutants, I think she's specifically referring to Mirage and Karma, though something tells me that this is something that will drag in the new mutants as a whole somewhere down the road. She says, I want you to come to my aid should ever I have need of you. And as an add-on to this, what she's going to give them is she's going to send them somewhere where they need to be. And this is how they're going to wind up tracking down Josh. What makes things very interesting here is that when they find Joshua, he is in Sevalith, the land of the vampires, and he seems to feel right at home. He's actually cutting a deal with one of the vampires, and when Mirage and Karma interrupt this deal, at first, one might expect this whole thing to go tits up, but that's not what's going to happen here. And this is where I think a lot of people, and I've said this before in regards to other world shenanigans, but if you are someone who is not familiar with the tropes and the way that certain unconventional games of Dungeons and Dragons can play out, I would forgive you if you thought this entire encounter was incredibly weird. But it's not. It's one of those situations where we expect certain stereotypes out of certain types of creatures and characters in fantasy and myth. We actually expect vampires to be somewhat treacherous by nature, but on the whole, they don't have to be. And that's exactly what's going on here. Joshua is cutting a deal with a vampire. They're actually, for what I can only imagine, they seem to have already met before, and they seem to already be fairly acquainted, and it doesn't seem like there's any ill will towards them. As a matter of fact, there's even a point where Joshua even corrects them on the fact that witch breed is not a word we use for mutants, and when he corrects the vampire on it, the vampire apologizes. And when Mirage and Karma make the assumption that Joshua may have been Renfielded, by Renfield I mean turned or ghouled, going towards terminology that stems back to Bram Stoker's Dracula, the vampire seems a bit offended because he's like, wait a minute, why would you guys think that I would do this? Why would you judge me just because I'm a vampire? And more importantly, when Joshua explains that this is something that mutants are used to, we are used to being persecuted and hunted. We are used to people wanting to hurt us because of what we are, and the vampire is just as equally aghast at that. They are offended at the fact that anyone would do this to another group of people, because I'm pretty sure if anyone would understand being persecuted and hunted for being what they are, it would probably be a vampire. But when the deal is cut short and Joshua says that he'll catch this vampire later, Karma and Mirage let him know that they're not going to allow this to happen, and Joshua is going to make a very strong case for why Krakoa is not for every mutant. Joshua doesn't want to go back. He doesn't want to go back to Krakoa. He doesn't want to go back to the human world. He wants to stay in Otherworld because in the most base sense of terms, Joshua is what we have always considered a Morlock, a mutant who cannot pass for human. Kind of like how we look at characters like Nightcrawler. Nightcrawler is technically a Morlock, though we don't necessarily call him that all the time, but he can't pass for human. Joshua looks like Nightcrawler dialed up to 11. He has a full set of horns. He looks far more demonic than Nightcrawler does. He even makes an offhand comment about the fact that he originally lived in New Jersey, and he is the reason that rumors of the Jersey Devil started popping up again, and he just wants to live his normal life. He doesn't want to be treated like a mutant, he doesn't want to be treated like a human, and he doesn't want to be treated like a Morlock. When he's in Otherworld, there is no distinction, there is no difference. People just treat him like he is a person. They don't put a label on him. And that's kind of something that I feel like doesn't get talked about enough in regards to all this Krakoa business, is the fact that, yeah, he doesn't want to be labeled as anything. He wants to just exist. He wants to just be. And he even says it himself. He doesn't want to be special. He just wants to be Josh. Not to mention, he's a huge fan of like fantasy, medieval fantasy, and all other stuff, so this is a perfect world for him. And he doesn't even care whether or not he lives or dies in Otherworld, because once again, we must bring up the fact that if you die in Otherworld, the mental backup of you that Xavier makes, it becomes corrupted. Therefore, if you die in Otherworld and you're resurrected on Krakoa, you would come back wrong. You would kind of be this weird husk of yourself. It just wouldn't work out. And of course, at this precise moment, even though Saturnine knows how to fix the problem, she's not willing to do it yet. And when Mirage brings up the idea of, aren't you afraid of being alone? He brings up that he's not alone, because you see, Mirage and Karma are thinking in terms of other mutants. What Josh is thinking about is that he's not alone because he has friends in Otherworld. They may not be mutant, but that doesn't make them any less friend or even family. And even though the idea of being able to live and die and live again is, for all intents and purposes, a really attractive thing, he actually hasn't felt this alive since coming to Otherworld. Now, of course, this actually makes Mirage and Karma rethink their whole stance on this, and they are willing to let him live in Otherworld and come and go as he pleases, so long as he checks in at least once a month, just so they know that he's okay. They don't want him out here just, lost and thinking that he doesn't have a way back home, which technically does. He actually has some magic that is going to help him get back to Avalon anytime he wants, which is where the gate is. And more importantly, he says he's going to use his time over here wisely and map out Otherworld for mutant kind, because that is actually something that mutants don't have. They don't have a map of Otherworld, so this would actually be a great opportunity to become a cartographer and figure the whole thing out. Going back to the White Rabbit, this actually leads to Karma realizing that if Josh is out here living his best life, why shouldn't I? There's something that I need to do. There's something I need to let go of, and we know that Karma has been plagued by something for the last several issues, and this is something that actually kind of goes all the way back to her brother Tran. Tran is Karma's twin brother, and if you go back to, I believe it is Marvel Team Up number 100 and the New Mutants Dead Soul story arc, that is kind of where all of this is rolling back to, and this is this instance where Karma found herself at odds with Spider-Man, but Karma being up against Spider-Man and Tran trying to take Spider-Man down himself, Karma realizing that she was on the wrong side of things and that Spidey was not the bad guy in all this. Something that I feel Karma should have known, considering the fact I don't think this was her first time ever meeting Spider-Man, but that's neither here nor there. Point of the matter is, to save Spider-Man, she absorbed the soul of Tran into her own body, and he has occupied her body ever since. Now, this technically killed Tran, at least his physical body, but he is still very much alive within her. And Tran had kind of plagued the New Mutants for the foreseeable future from that moment, basically influencing every move that Karma made, and over time, Karma had found a way to take Tran's soul out of her body and allowed it to act freely. And in the long run, this ended up leading Karma down a dark path. She actually started doing some pretty shady shit of her own, and while some liked to believe the idea that this was Tran's influence, it actually turned out that Karma was just as much to blame as anybody else. And ultimately realizing what was going on, she ended up taking possession of magic and forcing magic to stab Tran with the soul sword. And this forced Tran's disembodied soul to return to Karma's body, where it has been ever since. Well, as it turns out, this little white rabbit is Tran, manifested into a physical form, or at least the mental projection of one. And Karma knows this because she said that Tran was always fascinated by fairy tales, and one of his personal favorites was the one about the white rabbit. So it makes sense that he's manifested as a white rabbit in a kimono that looks eerily similar to one that we saw Tran clothed in one of the last times that we saw him. And she reveals that even though they were once enemies, she did realize that somewhere deep down in him that he didn't want to do the things that he was doing, that he wanted to have peace between them. And that while she doesn't regret protecting herself, she does regret not being able to protect him. And this brings her to one conclusion and one conclusion alone. The only way to fix this problem, to fix everything that's going on with her, is to go through the crucible and have Danny be her partner. And I think what Sheehan is trying to pull off is that she is going to have herself recreated to die and then be resurrected and be free of Trans Soul, allowing Trans Soul to maybe possibly be resurrected as well in a Krakoan husk, meaning we'll probably be seeing Tran coming back to life very soon, and whether or not he is going to buy into what Krakoa is selling is a whole other story. Now, those aren't the only things that are going on here. We actually have more Shadow King shenanigans going on here. This is actually something that is technically at the very beginning of the book, but what's going on here is that Shadow King is actually taking his attention off of the children for a moment to actually put his attention towards Wolfsbane. Something tells me he is going to try to manipulate Wolfsbane into becoming the next host for the Shadow King, if only temporarily. There's something very sinister that's going on here, and I'm not 100% sure. This could all be misdirection. We don't know. This is just good storytelling. But Shadow King recognizes that Wolfsbane has been in a great deal of pain, especially after learning the truth about her son. And I'm not going to rehash it all here. If you want to know more about it, you go back to these videos that I'll point out here, and you can go check that out. However, Amal Farouk recognizes that he can actually sense everybody who needs help on the island. Everybody is crying out psionically to him, or not necessarily to him, but it's something that he can feel because of his telepathic abilities. And more importantly, he senses Wolfsbane above most others because her pain is so much more exponentially strong right now. But the thing is, he doesn't just want to help her soothe her pain, he wants her to help him sense out the pain of others that is unique to someone like her. You see, Amal has never been a parent, so he doesn't understand or is even really able to comprehend loss on the level that Wolfsbane is feeling right now. And though he says that he would prefer that if in those instances that the thing that comes to, save these people would rather be her than him, I don't know. Something about that. I got questions because something tells me that Amal Farouk is not playing, Mr. Benevolence here. I mean, yes, we want to believe that all mutants can change, but we've also seen what Amal Farouk has done. Something tells me he is going to use Wolfsbane as a way to make some sort of a connection with the mutant Scout, because you gotta remember, Scout is not on board with any of Amal Farouk's plans because she doesn't want to die, and she knows there's a chance someone will get hurt, and he needs someone with more of a parental hand, more of a parental soul to maybe break through her. That's what I think he's plotting at, because he knows he needs Scout to complete his mission. And who better than Wolfsbane, a mother who is still reeling from the inability to get her son Tyr back, who better than her to try and connect with Scout? A familial bond could potentially be built between them, and Amal Farouk can use that. We actually see this again in this issue, where Cosmar, Rainboy, and Anoli and No Girl are trying to put Rainboy's essence into a flower to try and test out whether or not they can make this whole mutant body possession, body swap thing work. And while it does work, it's not 100% perfect, and the flower that Rainboy is inhabiting still dies. Now, while Rainboy says that he doesn't necessarily feel any extended pain from this, it's still one of those situations where they're playing with fire and don't realize it. And now what they're wanting to do, they're wanting to go to X Factor and get some of the bodies from the mutant body farm that they recently started and start using those for practice. Something that Scout tries to warn them about, that it's not a wise decision. And Anoli doesn't necessarily want to hear what Scout's selling, because the reason why they're all doing this is because you gotta look at them. Cosmar, Anoli, Rainboy, No Girl, these are all mutants who, for all intents and purposes, are also, as we talked about earlier with the case of Josh, they're all Morlocks for all intents and purposes. And they want to look normal, even though on this whole island of Krakoa, everybody is supposed to love everybody, and regardless of what your shape or form or look is, you're supposed to be accepted. And while they feel like they are considered ugly even by other mutants, especially Cosmar. And Anoli is someone who actually kind of projects this idea of not feeling desired or wanted, or being looked at as though they're less than or disgusting because of the way they look. While Scout tries to explain to them that doesn't matter, that she thinks that they are beautiful, that they don't have to go through all this. But we all know how this is going to play out. We're looking at young mutants who are willing to do whatever it takes to try to get what they want, and they are not going to listen to reason. And this is why I feel like the Shadow King has bad intentions in store for Wolfsbane. Or maybe he doesn't. Maybe he wants someone with more of a mother's touch to help out in this situation. Who knows? But I will say I'm enjoying this, really, really enjoying how Vita Ayala is weaving this story. I'm gonna go this right now. I think I said this in a previous video. Like, I was never crazy about all the other world shenanigans that were going on in Ten of Swords. However, I felt like with what is going on here in this comic, Vita Ayala actually made a more interesting story about Otherworld than what was in Ten of Swords. And now I'm kind of like, well, maybe Vita Ayala should have been more in charge of that one. I don't know. Maybe I'm right. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know, you guys. Yeah, it's all opinion. They were able to take this and make it something special and craft and weave a story around it that actually held my attention and kept me engaged. And not only that, I did feel it was kind of nice to get a little bit of a break from the Shadow King and Amal Farouk shenanigans, even though technically they are present in this comic. They're not the main focus of it. And we also got to focus on a little bit of a narrative about why Krakoa isn't for everybody. I feel like that is a very important thing that I don't think gets talked about enough. We're all trying to figure out why certain mutants aren't on Krakoa, but we're never trying to figure out why certain mutants don't want to be on Krakoa. And now, while the few that we have talked about, namely Mikhail Rasputin, while they are on the more problematic side of things, I think it was nice to actually see a perspective that was on the less problematic side of things, one that is a non-problematic side. But if you enjoyed this video, Hulk smash that like button and make sure to share this video all over the internet and with all your friends so they'll know how you leveled up your comic book big brain in regards to New Mutants and Reign of X. On your way out, make sure to hit that subscribe button and let me know what you thought about New Mutants number 17. Keep it plus ultra and sound off in the comments.